Homelessness. How would you address the homelessness crisis in California, separate from housing affordability?
I want to focus first on the folks who are struggling with mental health and addiction, the folks who are living on the street and they do not want to move into housing if provided. What do you do about that homeless population?
Enforce the law, get people into treatment, and increase mental health capacity by getting a waiver from the Medicaid IMD rule that stops any institution with more than 16 beds getting Medicaid funding. Enforce the law, get people off the streets into treatment, whether that's drug treatment, mental health treatment, job training. We got to get, look, here's a simple way of putting it. We wouldn't accept someone we loved living in those conditions on the street.
So what do you do in those situations?
You require the treatment. And
how do you do that? Because we no longer have locked facilities.
No, it's actually illegal under California law, because in 2016 a bill was passed which has become known as Housing First. That's the name of the policy. It was actually originated in the Obama administration as federal policy implemented through HUD, Housing and Urban Development. California was the only state to actually turn that into state law, which makes it illegal for any organization receiving state money for homelessness to require any kind of response from the client, whether that's treatment or anything. So what you have is this crazy situation. I've been there.
So then what do you do about that?
As governor, how do you change that?
Well, again, my first step, invite the legislature to overturn this law. If they won't do it, then we have to step in at the state level through executive action to just as Gavin Newsom is doing right now. I mean, he's sent just on the day that we're recording this conversation, he made an announcement that what's he going to do? He's going to have crime suppression teams sending in with state resources, state law enforcement going in to cities, and he's going to clean homeless. The latest promise is clearing homeless encampments in 30 days. And so he's using the power of the state to forcibly act where cities and counties haven't done their job. And if he can do it, then so can I, and I will. And let's hope, by the way, that he has dealt with the problem. I hope he does work. I hope it does work this time, and isn't just the latest example of words from Gavin Newsom that aren't matched by action.
So if I understand you correctly, you would fund Prop 36 by defunding homelessness programs. So how would you...
This is not...
How would you address the homelessness crisis in California?
Number one, honesty. If we keep calling it homeless, we are never, ever, ever going to fix this, because it has nothing to do with homeless. Every single one of them have a home, or they had a home. They were kicked out of their home because of their drug abuse, their alcohol abuse, their mental illness, which came first, which started first, it doesn't matter. That is why they don't have homes. They either using drugs and alcohol and didn't pay their rent, so they were evicted, or they were kicked out of their homes. We deal with them on a daily basis. That's all, the majority of our time is spent with the people that we're referring to as homeless. And our job, every single deputy's job daily, is to try and convince them that we can get them the help that they need to get off drugs and alcohol, get them mental health care if they need it, to get them back to their families. We contact every single one of their families, and all of their families say, no, we won't take them back. They know why they're there. They chose it. They chose the drugs over us. They chose, we don't want the abuse. We don't want the whatever it was. And as long as they're going to be addicted to the substance abuse that they are on, we will not take them back. So we will quit calling it homeless. This is not about homes. They don't even want homes. They're perfectly happy where they are. We're giving them money to sustain themselves. We're letting them stay wherever they want. When you ask them, the majority of them are always under the influence of drugs. They tell us that we're the problem. We're the ones that are off. They're perfectly fine. They don't want help.
So I want to sort of specify homelessness and sort of the two groups. There's the group that you're talking about. There are also, we see the data, there are families who are homeless, who are seeking shelters. There are folks who don't necessarily have drug abuse or alcohol problems. There are people who don't choose to live on the street. So I hear what you're saying, but what about the other element of homelessness that when it comes to this sort of housing affordability crisis?
So you saying that right there is my campaign. That right there was my biggest campaign speech. Not only, now those, yes, there are those people. From the law enforcement world, we come in contact with those too. And the reason why we know those stats is because every one of those want help, and we get them help. When we come across a family that is living in their car, a woman with her kids, a young kid that 18, 20, 24 years old that was kicked out of his house for whatever reason, when we find them, They want help. They ask us, yes, if you can help me, I will do anything. I need help. I'm tired of living in my car. I can't have my kids in my car. And deputies and cops jump over, do backflips because, oh my gosh, we found somebody. Now we can put the wheels in motion of getting them help. And it's easy.
How
and
do
we
you
get
do
them
that
help.
statewide as governor?
It's already happening. That is already happening. This emotional argument that you think there's all these people out there that are just living on the streets and they're forced to live on the streets and poor them and they want something else is not true. Yes, they are there until we find them, and we are finding them every single day because we contact them every single day. The ones that want help get help immediately. We have systems set up. We have county governments, city governments, state governments that are set up to help those people. We have nonprofits that are begging for people to come into their facilities and so they can help them. That is the emotional argument that is being played on all of us to believe that the rest of them, they're in the drug-induced psychosis, that it's all of them.
Let's start with specifically the folks who are dealing with mental health or drug addiction. How do you address that first?
So let's start with where we are. We spent $37 billion as a state between 2019 and 2024 on homelessness. We have two solutions. One of them is to put them into shelters. The other is long-term housing. Long-term housing seems like it costs about $1 million a key and takes 7 years. People on the street don't like to go into shelters. So let's talk about what it means to be on the street for a second. Mm-hmm. A small proportion of the people who start on the street have mental health problems. It's maybe 15%, but being on the street is incredibly stressful and creates mental health problems for almost everyone. So actually getting people off the street as fast as possible has got to be a gigantic priority. That's the first point. Second of all, so what I would say is we are focused on two things, neither of which is working. And we can see that because homelessness has been getting worse, even though we've been pouring billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars into it, $70,000 a person. There's an interim step, which is emergency interim housing that is much, much, much cheaper, that gets people off the streets much, much faster, puts them in a situation that about 2/3 of them choose to go into, and it pays for itself within about a year. So I'm talking about a completely different solution than the two solutions that we have decided are the only possible solutions to check this.
How do you address the drug addiction and mental health and those folks who don't want to go into those?
Okay, so I believe, so let me keep going. It is unfair to ask people living on the street to get off the street if you don't have a safe place for them to go. Mm-hmm. It is not unfair to ask people who are living on the street to get off the street if they do have a safe place to go that they can go to immediately. The cost of homelessness is often described, $37 billion. Those are dollars out the door for Californian taxpayers. Okay, but that's not the cost. That's one of the costs. The other cost is people are scared to walk down the streets. Stores close. There is a hollowing out of parts of cities, parts of major cities, parts of, an awful lot of cities and towns throughout California. That is a huge undocumented cost. So the idea of getting people off the street into a safe place is critical for mental health, including drug addiction. It is critical. It is a much more humane thing to do than to do the perfect thing in 7 years when people are absolutely stressed out.
So what do you do for those folks who have mental health and drug addictions? Do you arrest them? Do you put them in locked facilities? How do you address that?
They've got to be moved off the streets. They've got to be moved into facilities where they are safe, but also where people are safe from them.
Chronic street homelessness is very visible. It's very painful for us all to observe. And so I think we do need to be offering resources and making sure that we have them. Governor Newsom rolled out his Care Court, a proposal where people could be under a set of protections, forced to take resources. That's just beginning. It's been piloted in a few places. I'm interested in seeing the data and how that works.
So far, the data is showing that folks are not using it, actually. And that CalMatters just did an investigation this week, and it's pretty disappointing so far. But as you mentioned, it is still early on. What about folks living on the street who are refusing resources, who do not want to go into mental health or substance abuse treatments?
Well, the Care Court is a process to force them to do that or make a choice about getting off the street.
My understanding is care court has to have a family member do that. So what about folks who don't have family members who are just living on the streets and refusing resources?
Well, so I think that we can offer them opportunities for resources. And if they continue to violate the law, if they're camping in places where camping is inappropriate, which is most places, then law enforcement is going to make a decision. They're going to offer them resources. They're going to try to build that relationship and get them housing and care. If they don't, then law enforcement's going to remove those encampments. That's already been happening across California.
Well, California has nearly half of the nation's unsheltered homeless population. When I ran for mayor, there were 5,000 people living outside in tents. The answer is we need to have places for people to go, places that are safe, dignified, connect people to services. For some people, that can be shelter or interim housing. We can build those quickly and cost effectively. San Jose has led the state in building interim housing. For some people, that's not the most appropriate first stop. They actually need to start in a more therapeutic, treatment-centered space for addiction and mental illness. The only answer is for the state, and I think the governor has a critical role to play in leading this effort, to create a statewide framework that says cities, you've got to lead on shelter, counties, only you can lead on treatment capacity. We need tens of thousands of additional beds, which is what cities and states in the Northeast have done because they have cold winters. It's inhumane and not politically feasible to leave thousands of people outside to freeze to death in a harsh winter. So they've been forced to be shelter first. They have beds for people. We'll have to muster the political will to do what we've never done before, which is hold every city and every county accountable for providing a certain amount of shelter and treatment capacity. And when it's available, we have to do everything we can to incentivize people to come indoors.
How do you fund it?
Most people, well, first of all, as you point out, we spent tens of billions of dollars on solutions that aren't scaling. In San Jose, we actually had less revenue over the last 3 years to put into solutions to homelessness. Literally, our primary source of revenue declined because it's cyclical and tied to the construction market or the real estate market. We had declining revenue, changed to a more pragmatic solution that cost 1/10 the amount per door and took 1/6 the amount of time to deploy, and we reduced the number of people living outside by 1/3 without more money. So it's not free. I've been a big proponent of HAP. The state needs to continue to fund flexible and accountable funding for homeless solutions at $1 billion a year, which was what it did for 6 years until it zeroed it out last year. The state must show up with resources, but cities, counties, and other entities, nonprofit providers, have to be accountable for using every dollar for maximum impact.
Well, I have some particular ideas here because one, I believe that we have to do more on the mental health and drug addiction side, because so many of the people that are homeless have these challenges that they're facing. First and foremost, we have to work closer with the cities and the counties with the money that we send them. And by the way, we send them a good chunk of money. The initiatives that the voters of California have provided, where we give them money directly to deal with homelessness, the money that the legislature has made available. And so we'll work with the cities and counties to make sure that that population of homelessness, and it's somewhere around 180, 190,000, I think the last census told us, that we work with them to help them make sure that folks can go to a place where they'll get the services they need.
What if they don't want to go to a place to get mental health or drug addiction services, and they want to be? Now, this is not everyone, certainly.
Yeah.
There are many people who are seeking affordable housing, and it sounds like you've addressed that. But for those folks who want to live on the street, who want to use drugs, or who don't want to deal with mental health, do you force them?
You're talking to a father. I'm going to help you, but I'm not going to let you hurt yourself if you say you don't want help and you need help. I'm going to help you. Those are Christian values. I'm going to try to help my brother and my sister. If my brother or my sister is clearly in need, hurting, and on the streets, I'm not going to just take their word that they don't want the help. I'm going to help them. And we have an obligation to do that, and we will. And that's where I think these drug courts, the diversion programs that we have must be implemented. That's where I think Prop 36 struck a good chord, because it says, I hear you, but I'm going to help you.
How are you going to fix homelessness in California, or can you?
Well, first of all, let's be clear. Homelessness rose dramatically, I think some 60% since I left. So we can't cherry pick, and we got to be clear that I had a fraction of what they have today. When I was mayor, I did more permanent supportive housing for homeless than the 12 years before me. So one mayor with 2 terms and the other mayor with 1 term. I was focused on building housing, both market rate and affordable. And in the middle of the recession, we did more than 20,000. So what would I do with respect to policy, homelessness in California? Let me share with you. I've said we will not criminalize homeless. We will be compassionate with homeless, but we can't tolerate chaos. And what we have in this state and cities across California is chaos when people, homeless people, can sell drugs in front of cops and not get arrested, when they could put encampments in front of schools and parks because we know what neighborhoods they're going to be in. We do when they can refuse beds and still stay on the street. So what I've said is, I think we need locked institutions. I think the care courts was a good step forward, but they didn't do enough to provide the mental institutions throughout the state.
Which we used to have and were shut down.
Yeah. And everybody loves to say that it was Ronald Reagan. Well, we've been in office for a long time since Ronald Reagan was governor. It's been incumbent on us to do something about the fact that there are mentally ill people whose families, who are a threat to themselves and others, whose families would like to see them in locked institutions, but all we have is jails for them. We need treatment. We need facilities that are specifically focused. So that's what I'm going to focus on. But let me share with you what we're going to do first. We spent $22 billion. Where did it go? We have a right to ask those questions. It doesn't mean we're not compassionate. It means we shouldn't throw money at programs that don't work, and we should double down on programs that do. And so what you'll see with me is that first, we're going to have an audit of that $22 billion to really get to the bottom. Identify what works, what doesn't, stop throwing money at what doesn't work. I just mentioned, I think we need locked institutions. I think we need, mental health facilities for these people. I think just like on climate action, we can't let the perfect get in the way of the good. Some people say that all we should be doing is permanent supportive housing for the chronically homeless at the tune of almost $1 million a unit. Other people are saying, hold it. We should provide beds, small homes, a number of different things. So you're going to see an all of the above approach. And that's, again, Julie, that's what comes with the kind of experience I bring to this job. I recognize there's no one way of doing this. Some cities are doing, Houston, doing things that work. You're seeing now San Jose and San Francisco moving in that direction. LA has started to address some of the homelessness. So I'm going to work with our cities and counties, but I can tell you what we're not going to do. We're not going to maintain the status quo because it's not working.
It's interesting. You're the first person so far that I've interviewed who's mentioned mental health facilities, opening mental health facilities.
And what I'm saying very clearly, if you have beds and services offered and you refuse it, you don't have a right to live on the streets. You just don't. That's not a policy that is criminalizing in any way or not compassionate. It's a policy that makes common sense to most people. Yes, if you don't have the resources, that's one thing. But if those resources are being provided and you continue to want to be on the street, well, you don't have a right to be.
So I've seen a couple models that actually have worked well in terms of how to address those who are chronically homeless. One, Bakersfield Homeless Center. What they do, they're a nonprofit organization. Anyone who appears before them or is homeless, and Kern County has actually contracted with them, but who is homeless comes into the center. they immediately are part of a program, whether it's education, whether it's job training, whether it's life skills training, whatever it is. But the idea is that we want to actually get people into housing as quickly as possible. Probably supportive housing in the beginning, but eventually being able to be in a rental. And in some places in California, there's a continuum of care process where they actually do want to even see people who have been formerly homeless actually own homes at some point. So we'll talk about that in the home on the home side. But the idea here is that we want to get those supportive services to these people as quickly as possible. With respect to encampments, the model that I have seen that works well, and they're here in the Bay Area, is one that builds small units where encampments are, bring people inside, those who want to come inside, and the majority do. The majority want a room where they can lock, not have to worry about their belongings, have some warmth, and we can then bring the services to them. And once they're able to get into the next level of services, then we have another cohort come in. An organization called Dignity Moves is putting up these tiny units, $35,000 per unit, really cost effective, but it's a way to at least get people indoors and finally giving them the attention they need. There is that population that is chronically homeless, will never want to be in any kind of a situation where they're brought indoors or in a shelter, that just really find that they thrive on the streets. That we are going to need to look at probably some sort of a program where they are going to have to be in an institution. There's just no way about it. Life on the streets is not particularly healthy. It's actually taking a toll on just the complexion of our communities. But the idea of this too, Julie, is that what I really have felt has been missing in the whole homelessness debate from the public generally, and yes, because we've reached this point of where I think people are just kind of fed up. But frankly, but for the grace of God, it could be you or I mean, just given the affordability crisis here in California, but it is just kind of a level of compassion. This is going to be a human intensive response where we're just trying to figure out what each person's situation is, how we connect them up with the right resources, and help them continue to get reintegrated back into the community and be in their own homes.
I'm curious what you think about, are you familiar with Mayor Mahan's sort of program in San Jose?
Yes.
And we've heard a lot of folks, we've had others say, we may need institutions, right? Locked institutions for folks who refuse drug treatment or mental health treatment. And I'm curious what you think about that, sort of saying, listen, we want to give you these resources. If you refuse these resources, then we're going to have to forcibly take you off the street.
Right.
What do you think about what they're doing in San Jose?
I do think it is something that is going to be necessary. And maybe it's not institutions in the way we think about institutions, but they cannot use the street as their permanent home. And so how do we bring them into an environment where I would hope that they would be open to having services provided to them, but if they're not, I do think it will have to be institutionalized care.
And we've shut down California's institutions. What does that look like? I mean, you probably know better than anyone, and I know this is sort of a hypothetical, but what does that look like financially for us to reopen those types of institutions?
It's it will be a financial hit, but I also think that we can be very thoughtful about how we do this.
Well, especially considering how much we've spent, and we don't know where it went on homelessness. Maybe there's a budget there for it.
But we also have, so think about the resources we have to work with, right? So in any downtown core right now, we have really kind of an abundance of commercial Class A office buildings that are not being fully utilized. So I don't know that it's about having to build something new. It's about probably reusing, just existing facilities, even looking at putting up some, other structures on state lands, on public lands that could be cost effective. But I think we can do this in a cost effective way if we think about what it is that we need to build. And so it's not, I would hope, and I hope that is the thinking, that we're not building from the ground up, but that we have a lot of resources to use.
How do you address the folks who choose to live on the street, who don't want help with whether it be mental health or drug addiction? This is a choice for them.
I support the effort to say we got to move housing encampments. We just have to be able to provide something in its place.
But how do you do that for somebody who's drug addicted and does not want to stop using drugs?
Well, you say if you want this housing, you have to participate in a substance abuse training program.
But what about the folks who don't want that housing?
Well, then they can't participate in the program. If they don't want to participate in the drug abuse program, then they can't be in that housing. It won't work. You will continue to try and serve this individual. The individual who says, I want to stay on the street, is probably dealing with a significant mental health challenge. And that requires a combination of things. One, having housing units that do have mental health supports built in. We call it supportive housing. It also means you have to have the kind of outreach workers who know how to work with someone who is dealing with a mental health issue. It won't work if you don't build in these supports. And my plan is to make sure that we accelerate the building of affordable housing and units for those who are homeless, who have both mental health issues and substance abuse issues.
All right.